know is a spy.
What a disaster!
Gotcha, crouton! This is what the president must feel like all the time.
A few moments later.
Ah! Words cannot express how much I hate France right now.
Oh!
Welcome to Bad Weapon Academy, where we look at the worst weapons TF2 has to offer, and I show you how to best utilize them. Today we're looking at the Liberty Launcher, also known as the Schwicky Schwag.
What's the Schwicky Schwag? What does that even mean?
It's the Liberty Launcher!
This weapon used to be the definition of a crutch when I first started playing the game. You'd get faster rockets, but one less rocket in the clip, so you could hit enemies easier in exchange for damage over time. It wasn't useless, but any good soldier would know that using the rocket launcher is just better since having 4 rockets means you'll get killed less often. It's just like the soldier always said.
Son, always remember, dying is gay.
Nowadays, any good soldier knows to use the rocket launcher over this thing for the same reason but different, and that's damage. This weapon hasn't really had a fall from grace like the last episode. It was never the best option, but it went from a usable crutch to the equivalent of shooting your enemies with empty cans of soda launched out of a t-shirt cannon. Yes, it is a metal projectile hitting your enemies at high speeds, but there's better options out there. This is another situation where one stat is all it takes to qualify the weapon for an episode, because it's so detrimental that it vastly outclasses the multiple upsides the weapon has to offer. So let's look at those. Your rockets will travel 40% faster than normal, which is definitely a noticeable upside. It's not the virtual hit scan of the direct hit, but it's definitely an upside when shooting at enemies. Although this can make rocket jumping somewhat wonky, as you have to get used to the new projectile speed. Though I'm bad at chaining my rocket jumps in the first place, so I don't know what that's like. Speaking of which, you take minus 25% damage from your rocket jumps, which isn't as much as it sounds like. You take 20 to 35 damage as opposed to the stock launcher's 27 to 46, and the 16 to 27 damage you take while wearing the gunboats with stock. Minor as it is though, it does make a difference. Even if you take maximum damage from your rocket jump, you can still do one more jump with the Liberty Launcher than you can with stock, assuming the same conditions. And if you take minimal damage, you can do 9 rocket jumps, assuming you don't take fall damage, compared to the stock launcher's 7. And to perform those extra rocket jumps with, you have 1 extra rocket in the clip, adding up to a total of 5. With this, you can stay in fights longer, which along with the faster projectile speed, I found very useful for dealing with scouts that like to try and dodge your rockets for as long as possible. If it ended here, this would indisputably be the best rocket launcher in the game. It, however, does not. Minus 25% damage. Fuck. This takes the base damage of the Liberty Launcher from 90 all the way down to 68. Barely better than fucking melee damage. And at max ramp up, you do less damage than the shotgun. 84 damage. This is downright painful. It's already comical in game how people can survive a rocket-propelled grenade hitting them point blank in the face, but now they can tank a whole hell of a lot of them. This affects everything you do. Soldier goes from one of the best classes equipped to deal with sentry guns to, Demo Man, are you free to do this for me? My gun is having some, performance issues. I understand it needs a significant downside to balance out the upsides, but this is so much for not enough. And it's for mechanics that other weapons do better. If you want a fuckload of rockets in your clip, use the airstrike. If you want to rocket jump around a lot, use the gunboats with any rocket launcher that actually does damage. And if you want faster projectiles, use the direct hit so that instead of those scouts tanking your point blank rockets, they get deleted by point blank rockets. This seems to be trying to be a jack of all trades rocket launcher, but the ones that specialize in the attributes this one is middling in are just more appealing options. Even the airstrike, which is similar in a lot of ways, at least has faster firing speed while rocket jumping, which makes it good at dealing with faraway sentries. As it stands, you don't do enough damage fast enough to keep up with higher damage classes. Heavies especially will shred right through you before you even get a chance to do anything about it. I usually just end up running away from them. So let's do something about this. In my experience using this weapon, there are 3 sets that are the most efficient, and they all require vastly different secondaries that take advantage of the fact that you take less damage from rocket jumping. The first and most straightforward method is to equip the buff banner. This backpack will give you and your nearby teammates a short boost of mini crits. This is a fantastic utility for any rocket launcher as they remove damage fall off while keeping damage ramp up and give you a 35% damage boost. So for the Liberty Launcher, once you're under the effects of a buff banner boost, you manage to completely negate the downside and remove damage fall off with a 10% damage bonus to boot. However, this boost only lasts for 10 seconds, and you need to deal 600 damage in order to fully charge it. And when your splash damage can do as little as 18 damage, that's a lot to ask for. And all the while you won't have a secondary ready to use in case you get rushed down. And it doesn't provide a passive benefit the way the Conqueror and the Battalion's backup do. On the plus side, it's not just yourself you're buffing once you pop the banner, it's your surrounding teammates. So you take a more supportive role once you use this, and you can help your other teammates who are more equipped to do more damage deal with those classes that you just can't deal with.
You cannot beat me!
No, I know. But he can.
Yeah! Oh, this is bad! Dead!
To this end, you can also use the other backpacks, but the buff banner is the one that will cover your weakness the best since it effectively removes the damage penalty once it's deployed. This set is definitely most effective in defensive situations where you can get a lot of people walking at you so you can build up your banner as consistently as possible. For offense, if you want to run a banner, you may be better off with the Battalion's backup since it gives your team a massive resistance to sentry fire. The next method is to equip a shotgun. Which shotgun you choose is up to preference, same as with the Brass Beast episode. The stock shotgun I'd say is actually the weakest choice with this set. The slow switching speed compared to the reserve shooter and panic attack can make it feel much more sluggish in fights where you have to think quick on your feet. Although its tighter spread and higher clip size are advantages against the panic attack and reserve shooter respectively. The panic attack is great for dealing quick 1-2 punches against your enemies, especially after you come in from a bomb, as you'll be able to get in close and do even more damage than your rocket launcher will do at point blank range, and you can do it without taking self damage. The reserve shooter is surprisingly tricky to use. Because the Liberty Launcher does less damage, it also deals less knockback, so it's much harder to launch your enemies in the air than it is with the stock rocket launcher and especially the direct hit. This is a sort of hidden downside of the weapon. Like I said, the damage penalty negatively affects everything you do. However, if you do manage to knock someone airborne, the reserve shooter will likely deal even more damage than an air shot would unless they fly far out of your range or a random bullet spread decides you can just go fuck yourself. This can also have a similar effect to the panic attack's 1-2 punch, although its effect is mostly limited to airborne opponents. It does still have a faster switch speed than the stock shotgun though, so it's still useful even if targets are on the ground. The final method is, aggressive Trolldier. Yeah, seriously. One thing I didn't mention is that I highly recommend the use of the Market Gardener with all of these sets. Because you take less damage from rocket jumps, you're much more free to go for risky Market Gardens while still having secondaries to fall back on. In fact, for the Buff Banner set, a Market Garden is actually a great way to build up a lot of the meter very quickly. And finally, with the gunboats, your rocket jumps are only going to damage you in the low teens. This is basically as good as having a rocket jumper that can still do damage, making you extremely mobile, and if you're good with your rocket jumps and Market Gardens, unlike me, you can be a serious threat. However, again, you have to be good at this to begin with. If you're going to try this one out, you need to make sure you get a lot of practice in and at least have the basics of rocket jumping down. So make sure you practice your Market Gardener swings and go practice on jump maps. This last one is much more theoretical so far, since I'm just not good at rocket jumping or consistently Market Gardening. I still beef it all the time, and I consider myself well below average. But if it's something you specialize in, then definitely give it a shot. I might make a short mini video once I see some more experienced rocket jumpers' feedback. Anyway, the point with all of these sets is to be more mobile and more versatile than the average soldier. Soldiers restricted to gunboats don't have access to shotguns or banners, so you being able to have what are essentially free mini gunboats means you can be a more effective double threat. You can dance around people in the air for quite a long time and make hasty escapes at lower health that other soldiers can't, while still having sustainability in the capacity of more rockets and a shotgun. However, the Liberty Launcher itself is still quite weak, and it'll let you down often in fights because it just can't get damage out fast enough to kill a lot of your threats. Having to rely so hard on your secondaries makes it a much more constricting gun than it needs to be, so let's shake it up a bit. Less damage for another rocket is a fair trade, but if the airstrike can have 8 rockets and only minus 15 damage, then surely we can bump it up a little bit for the Liberty Launcher, right? I'd try it at 15% and see how that goes, but if that makes it too strong, then maybe just a small buff where it's minus 20%. That would have to be paired with some other kind of buff though. What really irks me about this gun is that it just feels kind of slow sometimes. So what I'd like to see is a faster firing speed. So even though your individual rockets aren't doing as much damage, they're coming out even faster for a similar DPS. You might even be able to do some cool stuff with rocket jumping that you can't normally do with this change. These changes make it a bit more similar to the airstrike, but with the airstrike, if you want to actually use it effectively, you're basically limited to using the gunboats or the base jumper. The strength of the Liberty Launcher is its higher rocket jump resistance, which gives it higher versatility. You could even buff that too if you really want to make this thing the go-to rocket jumping gun. And one minor thing, if you're dead set on keeping the damage penalty as is, and want to make this a combo weapon, then I say go the degreaser route and give this thing a faster switching speed. Pairing it with the reserve shooter, panic attack, and even the market gardener then would be even more dangerous. Then let me festivize it and you're good to go. A rocket launcher worth using much more than the one we have now. The Liberty Launcher is far from unusable in its current state, and I did end up having fun with it when I wasn't getting shredded by team stacks, but the other rocket launchers are simply better, and there were so many times that I wished I was using them instead of this. I'd really like to see that changed. As it stands, go out there and soar with this thing. Drop that guy giving your team trouble with a well-timed market garden, and tell him Fish sent ya.
Oh my gosh, is that fish stick on a stick TF2?